Welcome to today's deep dive. And imagine, if you will, stepping out from a dark concrete tunnel and onto this blindingly bright, perfectly manicured soccer pitch.
Right, the ultimate stage.
Exactly. You're standing in front of tens of thousands of screaming fans. And, like deep down in your bones, that the entire world is watching you.
And that they expect you to lose.
Oh, totally annihilated.
Okay.
Expect you to be destroyed by a global sporting superpower. But now, imagine doing all of that, looking up at the stadium lights and just smiling.
Like you're having the time of your life.
Right. And that is exactly what the tiny island nation of Curacao did. But their story actually exposes a deeply uncomfortable truth about what it really means to be seen in the world of sports.
Yeah, today we are taking you on a journey into the actual mechanics of visibility in the global sports arena.
Because our mission today is to contrast two incredibly different, almost opposing lenses on representation, right?
We really are looking at a profound philosophical contrast here. On one side, you have this romantic, deeply joyful, almost cinematic narrative of Curacao making their historic debut at the 2026 Men's World Cup against Germany.
Which is just a crazy story.
It really is. And then on the other side, we have the cold, hard, unblinking reality of the 2024 Sports Media and Gender Report out of New Zealand.
So one is this story of a team capturing the world's imagination for this fleeting moment. And the other is a systemic analysis of who the media actually pays attention to, when the cameras aren't strictly focused on a Cinderella story.
Exactly. The core question we are trying to answer for you today is, well, what is the real difference between simply participating in a sport and actually being seen, represented, and respected by the media ecosystem?
Because it's not just about getting on the field. I mean, it's about how the story of you being on that field is told to the masses.
Right, and how those stories shape what we as a society believe is important. Because sports at their core, they're never just games.
No, not at all.
They are massive cultural mirrors. They reflect back to us whose stories our society truly values, who we expect to win, and who we expect to fail quietly.
Wow, fail quietly. That's a heavy way to look at it. But today, we're going to unpack how underdog stories capture our hearts, but also how these systemic, data-driven media biases dictate the narratives we digest every single day.
Usually without even realizing it, we are going to unpack the architecture of attention.
I love that. So I want to start with the romance, because the origin story of this Curacao team, as detailed in The Guardian, it feels like it was written by a Hollywood screenwriter.
It almost defies belief when you place it next to the spectacle of a World Cup.
It really does. Let's paint the picture for you. It is September 2023. Curaçao's national team is traveling from Trinidad to Martinique for a CONCACAF Nations League game.
And for those who might not follow regional football, CONCACAF is the governing body for North America, Central America, and the Caribbean.
Right, and this Nations League tournament is essentially a tier below the major qualifiers. So the financial resources at this level can be incredibly thin.
Which means you are operating without the safety nets that major European or South American teams just take for granted. You're completely at the mercy of regional logistics.
And in this specific instance, those logistics entirely collapsed,
Right.
Like completely collapsed. Their chartered flight falls through at the absolute last minute. They are stranded.
So instead of a sleek team jet, they end up having to use this tiny little propeller plane.
Yeah. And the capacity on this plane is so small that it can only take people in groups of 6.
It's wild.
Imagine the national team of a country having to commute to an international match, like they're taking a local shuttle bus back and forth across the Caribbean Sea.
Just flying back and forth all day.
The starting 11 barely make it to the stadium in Martinique on time. And the substitutes, they are literally still in the air or waiting at the terminal while the game is actually kicking off.
And here is the truly absurd detail. Their luggage didn't make it.
Right. The team coordinator, Wotra Jansen, actually went on record saying the whole ordeal was worthy of a film. You have professional athletes showing up to represent their country with nothing but the clothes on their backs.
They had their boots, their shin pads, and maybe, like, a spare pair of socks they happen to carry on.
No specialized gear, no medical equipment, literally none of the standard infrastructure of a modern football team.
And they walk out onto the pitch, exhausted, stressed, practically wearing their travel clothes, and they play in front of an incredibly intimate, almost non-existent crowd of just 913 people.
And they lose the match, 1-0.
Yeah. That image You know, playing without your luggage in front of 900 people, that is the absolute definition of obscurity in the modern sporting landscape.
Because you're technically playing international football, but you are completely unseen by the wider world.
Exactly. The global media apparatus does not care about a 1-0 loss in Martinique. You are in the dark.
But then, fast forward less than 3 years. It is Sunday, June 14th, 2026. We are no longer in Martinique. We are at NRG Stadium in Houston, Texas.
A slight upgrade.
Just a bit. The capacity there is over 70,000 people. The lights are glaring. The broadcast cameras are beaming the feed to hundreds of millions of homes globally.
And who is walking out from the tunnel onto the pitch for their first ever World Cup match? Curacao.
And they aren't playing a regional neighbor either. They are in Group E, facing off against Germany.
A 4-time World Cup champion. A total machine of global football dominance.
The juxtaposition is staggering. I mean, from a propeller plane and 913 fans to the biggest sporting stage on the planet against one of the historical titans of the sport.
To understand how they navigated this leap, we have to look at the cast of characters, starting with the man on the touchline who actually engineered this unbelievable run.
Dick Advocate.
Yes. Dick Advocate is a fascinating figure in this context. By managing Curacao in this specific game, Advocate actually became the oldest coach in World Cup history at 78 years old.
Wow, 78.
Yeah, and this isn't his first rodeo by a long shot. He's coaching his third distinct national team at a World Cup, having previously led the Netherlands and South Korea.
So we're talking about a manager who has been to the absolute highest peaks of international football.
He is an absolute veteran of the highest stakes, and he brings this immense wealth of tactical knowledge, this almost cynical, hardened European football brain, to a team that is essentially making its debut on the global stage.
And he's managing a squad that relies heavily on players of Curaçaoan heritage who were born in the Netherlands. We have to remember the colonial history here, right? Curaçao is a constituent country of the Kingdom of the Netherlands.
Right. So you have players like their captain, Leandro Bacuna, who grew up in the Dutch footballing system but chose to represent the island of his heritage.
And the psychological vibe of this team, going into a match where the world expects them to be completely destroyed, is just incredible. Bacuna explicitly told reporters, "We are a team that we love to have a little bit of a party. We love to have fun."
Which is just a remarkable statement to make before playing Germany.
Right before the biggest game of their lives, there were videos going viral on social media of the players singing, dancing, and playing instruments on the team bus on their way to face the Germans.
They were unapologetically embracing the moment. They knew they weren't the favorites, but they were absolutely refusing to be terrified.
They were projecting pure joy.
And Advocate echoed that sentiment perfectly. He mentioned that the team spirit was something he had rarely seen before in his entire decades-long career.
But he paired that joy with pragmatism, didn't he?
He did. He acknowledged they were a small team compared to Germany, but he promised they would make life difficult. He noted that in football, amateur or smaller teams regularly find ways to frustrate bigger sides.
So his strategy wasn't just to park the bus, put 11 men behind the ball, and pray for a 0-0 draw.
No, Advocate's plan was to use the space that Germany's aggressive, high-pressing attacking style would inevitably leave behind.
Okay, I want to pause here for a second and really push back on this joyful underdog narrative. Because as fans and as media consumers, we love this narrative, right? We just eat it up.
Oh, absolutely.
The dancing on the bus, the sheer joy, the plucky island nation taking on the giant. It's like cool runnings with football boots.
Yeah.
But I have to ask you, does focusing so heavily on them being this happy-to-be-here party team secretly undermine their athletic legitimacy?
That is a very valid question.
By framing them as the fun, dancing underdogs who are just thrilled to be invited, does the global media subtly patronize them? Are we treating them like a novelty act rather than serious elite athletes who fought their way through a brutal qualification process?
That is exactly the danger of the underdog trope. It can very easily slip into condescension. You run the risk of the media essentially patting the team on the head and saying, "Oh, isn't it cute that they're trying?" But the only way an underdog team shatters that patronizing framing is through their actual physical performance on the pitch. The narrative of the happy underdog only becomes a patronizing joke if the team completely rolls over and proves they don't belong on the same grass.
So we have to look at the actual match data from that game in Houston.
We do.
And the final score was brutal. It was 7-1 to Germany. The Germans showed absolutely no mercy, which is exactly what you expect from a team of that caliber. They don't take their foot off the gas.
It was a tactical dismantling.
Wow.
You had goals pouring in from Felix Seneccha incredibly early in the 6th minute. Then Nico Schlotterbeck found the net, followed by a Kai Havertz penalty right before the half.
Just a relentless wave.
Exactly. After the break, Jamal Musiala scored, then Nathaniel Brown, Denis Undav, and finally Havertz again right at the end to cap it off at 88 minutes. The German machine functioned perfectly.
It sounds like an absolute rout, like a bloodbath. If you just read the box score the next morning, you would think Curacao had no business being there.
If you only look at the final whistle, yes. But the box score doesn't tell the story of the 21st minute.
Ah, the 21st minute.
Curacao didn't just show up to take photos and swap jerseys. Advocates' tactical plan to exploit the vast open spaces behind the German defense when they pushed too far forward, it actually materialized.
And in the 21st minute, they broke through. Lovano Comenencia found the back of the net and scored the equalizer to make it 1-1.
The stadium must have absolutely exploded.
It really must have. And I love this detail from the Guardian's live blog of the match. With that single historic strike, Lovano Comenencia achieved this wild statistical quirk that sounds fake but is entirely real.
Oh, this is the best part.
He has now scored more goals against the German national team than Lionel Messi, Cristiano Ronaldo, Zlatan Ibrahimovic, Thierry Henry, Andres Iniesta, and Wayne Rooney combined.
That is just incredible.
Think about that. That list of legends, like the greatest players of the modern era, has 0 goals against Germany in World Cups, Euros, or major friendlies. But Lovano Comenencia, playing for a team that was on a 6-seater propeller plane 3 years ago, has one.
It's a brilliant piece of trivia, but it serves a much deeper purpose, you know? It speaks to the core of why this debut mattered so much, regardless of the final 7-1 scoreline.
How so?
Well, Angelo Succe, Curaçao's performance coach, articulated this perfectly before the tournament even began. He talked about how this entire journey was fundamentally about establishing a baseline.
Right.
He said it was about showing the next generation of kids in Curaçao that the impossible is possible. The reality of playing a football superpower with immense depth and resources, it eventually caught up with them over 90 minutes.
Of course it did.
But for that brief window after the 21st minute, when the score was locked at 1-1 against the 4-time world champions, Curaçao commanded the absolute, undivided attention of the sporting world. They weren't a cute novelty act in that moment. They were a legitimate threat.
They really harnessed the ultimate power of visibility. A mega event like the Men's World Cup acts like a giant, blinding magnifying glass. For those 90 minutes, Curaçao existed at the absolute center of global sports media.
Every sports journalist, every fan, every broadcaster was looking directly at them.
But if we pull back and look at the broader mechanics of sports media, a darker question emerges. What happens when that magnifying glass moves away?
That is the crucial pivot. Curaçao captured the world through the sheer gravitational pull of a mega event. The World Cup forces the media to look at you.
Right.
But what happens when the romance fades? What happens when the tournament ends? The international reporters pack up their laptops and we return to the daily, grinding economic reality of how sports media allocates its attention on, say, a random Tuesday in October.
And to understand that, we have to transition from the emotion of the pitch to the data of the newsroom.
Yeah.
Which brings us to the 2024 Sports Media and Gender Report from Sport New Zealand and Essentia. I spent hours going through this report, and it is a massive, incredibly detailed piece of research. They didn't just look at a few articles. They analyzed around 1/3 of all sports coverage in New Zealand across the entire year of 2024.
Print, broadcast, online, they scraped it all.
And the reality it reveals about sports media is just entirely separated from the underdog romance we just discussed.
Yeah.
It's about systemic structures. So let's start with the most startling finding in the entire document, a phenomenon I call the visibility paradox.
The paradox is stark, and it really challenges everything we think we know about progress in sports media. The report found that the overall gender balance in sports media coverage actually improved slightly.
Okay, so it went up.
Right. In 2023, 26% of all sports stories focused on women. In 2024, that number ticked up to 27%. So literally, more physical newspaper space and digital column inches were dedicated to women's sports overall.
That sounds like a win.
It does. However, the overall visibility, meaning the actual physical proportion of female athletes, female coaches, female officials, and female fans who were represented, photographed, or quoted in that coverage, decreased.
Wait, what?
Yeah. And at the exact same time, the number of male subjects represented in the media increased.
I seriously had to read that page of the report 3 times. It's like the media bought a much bigger billboard to advertise women's sports, but they actively decided to print fewer names and paint fewer faces on it.
It's a great way to picture it.
How in the world does the amount of coverage go up, but the actual visibility of the human beings playing the sport go down? Like, what are the mechanics behind that?
To understand the how and the why, we really have to look at the 3 key drivers the data points to. The first mechanism is what we can call the post-World Cup dip.
Okay.
We have to remember that 2023 was the year of the massive FIFA Women's World Cup, which was co-hosted by New Zealand. In 2024, coverage of women's football naturally tanked because the mega event was over.
Right, the circus left town.
Exactly. But the sports news cycle doesn't stop just because a tournament ends. Sports news is like this massive conveyor belt that must have a product placed on it every 24 hours.
The beast must be fed.
Yes. The editors have to fill the back pages. They have to fill the 6:00 p.m. sports broadcast. When the massive engaging product of the Women's World Cup was removed from that conveyor belt, what did the newsrooms replace it with?
Let me guess, more men's sports.
They filled the void with men's football. Specifically, coverage surged for the Wellington Phoenix, making a massive run in the A-League, which is the top tier of men's football in Australia and New Zealand.
Right.
And they heavily covered Chris Wood, the New Zealand striker scoring goals in the English Premier League. So you have a massive male roster sport organically surging to fill the vacuum left by a female mega event.
The conveyor belt analogy is perfect. The media machine needs content, and it just defaults to the most readily available established narratives. If there isn't a Women's World Cup happening right now, the editor just turns to the English Premier League because it's always there, generating endless daily content.
Exactly.
I was looking at the F1 data in the report too, and it struck me that this dynamic exists in individual sports as well. The report calls it the F1 effect. It feels like established, massively funded sports just inherently eat the media pie, leaving crumbs for everyone else. Did the report back that up?
It did, and the F1 effect perfectly illustrates how the modern sports PR machine creates invisibility. In 2024, Liam Lawson, a young New Zealand driver, was selected to race in Formula One.
Which is huge news.
Naturally, this dominated the sports headlines in his home country. The media focused intensely on this incredibly exclusive, entirely male grid of 20 drivers. But F1 isn't just 20 guys in cars. It is a massive traveling city. By focusing exclusively on the male drivers, the media entirely ignored the massive, growing ecosystem of women working in Formula One. The female officials, the pit crew members, the aerodynamic engineers, the strategists, and the fans.
Because the PR feeds provided by F1 and the narrative structures favored by sports desks are designed to turn the male driver into a superhero. The spotlight was so intensely focused on Lawson's narrative that it completely blinded the media to the women standing right next to the track.
Precisely. They were there, but they were rendered structurally invisible by the way the story was framed.
Which leads us to the third driver, and this is where the mathematics of media really work against female visibility. It's the solo sport factor.
Yes.
This one blew my mind.
The report noted that in 2024, the media actually gave more space to a broader, more diverse mix of women's sports compared to the previous year.
Okay.
But the sports that saw the most significant gains were heavily skewed toward individual pursuits. We are talking about Lulu Sun in tennis, making a historic run to the quarterfinals at Wimbledon.
Incredible run, by the way.
Oh, absolutely. We are also talking about Dame Lydia Ko winning gold in golf at the Olympics. And we're looking at massive coverage spikes in individual cycling, canoe sprint, and swimming.
Let me break down the math of this for you because it really explains the whole paradox. Think of it like this. A sports reporter goes to Wimbledon to cover Lulu Sun. Who do they interview for the article?
Right.
They quote Lulu Sun, they might quote her opponent, and maybe her coach. That's 2, maybe 3 voices. Now compare that to a reporter covering a men's rugby match or a football game. That reporter goes to the stadium and interviews the captain, the star forward, the manager who gives a 10-minute press conference, the assistant coach, the physio giving an injury update, and 3 guys in the stands for a fan reaction piece.
Yep.
That is 7, 8, or 9 male voices.
Exactly. Even if the newspaper editor decides to give exactly 1 full page to the Lulu Sun tennis match and exactly 1 full page to the men's rugby match, perfect 50-50 equality in terms of page space, the rugby page blasts 7 different male voices out into the world, while the tennis page only broadcasts 2 female voices.
So increased coverage space for women does not inherently result in greater visibility of female voices.
Yeah, it really doesn't.
The systemic reporting structures naturally favor massive male rosters. The whole system is designed to analyze 50-man football squads and 30-man rugby teams. It makes true, equitable female visibility a mathematical uphill battle. You are fighting against a media ecosystem that generates quotes by volume, and individual female sports simply don't produce the same volume of quotes as a men's team sport.
So we have established this landscape where slightly more physical space is given to women, but mathematically fewer women are actually speaking or being shown.
Right.
Which forces us to ask the next logical question. For the women who do make it past the gatekeepers, who do secure the interview and get their quotes into the articles, well, how are they being talked about?
I noticed a massive shift in the data from 2023 to 2024 regarding the specific topics reporters chose to focus on. In 2023, there was a lot of focus on female athletes' training, their rigorous preparation, and crucially, their advocacy for their sports. But in 2024, coverage of training and preparation dropped significantly, from 51.2% down to 43.8%. Instead, the media pivoted heavily toward results and performance, which shot up to 67.3%. Why does that shift happen?
It happens because of the difference between introducing a subject and covering an established commodity.
Okay, unpack that.
Well, in 2023, ahead of the Women's World Cup, the media had to introduce these athletes to a broader public. When you report on training, preparation, and background, you are often providing athletes with a platform to advocate for their sport.
Like telling their origin story.
Right. You allow them to talk about the struggle, the lack of funding, the structural inequalities, or the grassroots efforts needed to grow the game, especially in lesser reported sports like surfing or para-equestrian. It's human interest journalism.
But when you strip that away and focus purely on results, the box score, the lap time, the final whistle, you're treating the sport merely as a commodity. You are removing the human struggle from the narrative. You aren't talking about how hard it was for a female athlete to get funding for a coach. You are only talking about whether she won or lost on Tuesday.
And that pivot to pure performance metrics directly exposes what I consider the most damaging finding in the entire report: the expectation gap.
Yes. The report actively tracks the narratives around what the media expects from athletes. And it found that media reports expecting high performance from women dropped noticeably in 2024, down to 37.8%.
Which is a huge drop.
Meanwhile, expectations of high performance from men actually increased. They gave the specific example of rugby in New Zealand. There were intense, high-pressure, borderline obsessive expectations placed on the men's Super Rugby teams, but far lower, almost muted expectations for the women's Super Rugby Apiki League.
And this ties directly into the emotional themes the writers use. Because the media lowered their expectations for female athletes, the negative narratives around female athletes struggling or causing disappointment also declined.
Because if you don't expect them to win the championship, you aren't disappointed when they lose in the semifinals.
Exactly.
Okay, I have to admit, when I first read this part of the report, I really struggled with it. I want to push back on the idea that this is a bad thing. Isn't a drop in massive, crushing media expectations actually a relief?
It's a fair point to raise.
Because the report specifically notes that when Lulu Sun got knocked out in the quarterfinals of Wimbledon, the media and the quoted sources were overwhelmingly empathetic. They celebrated her historic breakthrough. They focused on how far she had come.
Yeah.
They didn't crucify her on the front page for failing to win the entire tournament. Isn't that empathetic narrative incredibly healthy? Frankly, isn't it better than the brutal, toxic pressure cooker we put on men's teams, where anything less than a championship trophy is deemed a catastrophic failure and managers get fired the next morning?
It is a profound question. On an individual human level, absolutely. Empathy is far healthier for an athlete's mental health than toxic, unyielding pressure. Nobody wants to see a 22-year-old athlete destroyed by the press for losing a tennis match.
Right.
However, we have to look at this on a systemic, sociological level. And systemically, a lack of expectation is a double-edged sword. Not expecting high performance implies a fundamental lack of assumed dominance.
I see where you're going with this.
When the media is endlessly empathetic about a loss, it subtly, almost imperceptibly, tells the audience that female success is a nice surprise. It frames their achievements exactly the same way we framed Curacao scoring a single goal against Germany.
Oh, wow. That just clicked.
Exactly. It's treated as a charming anomaly. Male success, on the other hand, is presented as the expected natural baseline of the athletic universe.
Like the All Blacks, or the German national football team, or Max Verstappen in F1, they are expected to dominate.
They are expected to be ruthless. If they don't dominate, it's front page, crisis-level news, the sky is falling.
But if a female team doesn't dominate, the media pats them on the head for trying their hardest.
Yes, that lack of expectation, disguised as empathy, is actually a soft form of marginalization. It tells the viewer that women's sports aren't serious enough to warrant genuine critical sporting analysis.
That completely flips my understanding of it. We are essentially treating women's sports year-round the exact same way we treat an underdog island nation once every 4 years. We applaud the effort, but we don't expect them to run the world.
That's a perfect summary.
Which brings us to the ecosystem itself. Why do these massive narrative gaps exist? Why do newsrooms default to these tropes? It comes down to who holds the microphone and when we as a society choose to plug that microphone in. Both Curacao and women's sports suffer from what I'm going to call mega event dependency.
Mega event dependency is the defining feature of the visibility data. The volume trends in the 2024 report are crystal clear. Women's sports coverage only truly spikes during massive, undeniable, globally televised events. If you look at a graph of the year, you see an enormous spike in July and August. Why? The Paris Olympics. And it's worth noting that at those Olympics, female athletes won 8 out of New Zealand's 10 gold medals. Their performance was undeniable.
And there's another one later in the year, right?
Yes, you see another massive spike in October, entirely driven by the White Ferns. The New Zealand women's cricket team winning the ICC T20 World Cup, which is the massive international tournament for the shorter format of cricket. But in between those massive peaks, deep, deep valleys of obscurity.
And when you look behind the bylines, when you look at the people actually writing the articles, editing the footage, and reading the teleprompters during those valleys, the discrepancies are glaring. The report looked at the major media outlets in New Zealand to see who was actually delivering the sports news.
And what did it find?
Now, TVNZ, the state broadcaster, did quite well. They featured 59.1% female presenters in sports. But when you look at outlets like RNZ, the major public radio network, or 3, which is the television broadcast arm of the media company stuff, the presenters and bylines were overwhelmingly male. For 3, a staggering 70.1% of the sports presenters were men.
And that structural bias extends far beyond the presenters on screen to the sources those journalists choose to quote.
Right.
As we touched on with the solo sport math earlier, the presence of female sources in sports coverage continued to decline, dropping from 21% in 2023 to just 19% in 2024.
Just 19%.
Think about the gravity of that statistic. It means that 81% of the people explaining sports, analyzing sports, breaking down the tactics, and offering expert opinions on sports in the media are men. The voice of authority is overwhelmingly male.
It even bleeds into the stands. This detail absolutely floored me. Even when reporters are just doing lazy, man-on-the-street journalism, grabbing fans outside a stadium or in a pub for a quick quote about a game, male voices dominate.
Yeah, the report specifically noted that male football fans are the most frequently quoted fan demographic, far outpacing female fans, regardless of the sport being played.
It really is a closed loop. Men are assigning the stories, men are writing the stories, men are presenting the stories, men are offering the expert tactical quotes, and men are giving the emotional fan reactions from the pub.
Which perfectly encapsulates the visibility paradox we started with. You can increase the raw percentage of stories about women's sports to 27% or 30% or 50%. But if the people writing those stories, commenting on those stories, and reacting to those stories are all men, you haven't actually increased female visibility in society.
You've just changed the subject the men are talking about.
Exactly. You are still viewing the female athlete exclusively through a male lens.
I think the best way to visualize this entire ecosystem is to think about a conveyor belt. Or maybe, to bring it closer to home, think about real estate.
Okay, I'm listening.
It's like we treat women's sports as a holiday home. We only visit it during the Olympics or a massive World Cup. We unlock the door, dust off the furniture, turn on all the lights, and spend a few weeks marveling at how nice it looks, how talented the athletes are, and how much we genuinely enjoy being there.
Yeah.
But the men's sports house, that's our primary residence. We live there year-round. We are constantly in there analyzing the plumbing, debating the paint colors, complaining about the drafty windows, and obsessing over the daily gossip of the neighborhood.
That analogy hits the nail on the head. because it highlights the difference between a fleeting visit and sustained investment. True media equity isn't just throwing a massive parade down Main Street when the White Ferns win a global World Cup.
Right.
True equity isn't just going absolutely crazy on social media for 15 minutes when Curacao scores a historic 21st-minute goal against the mighty German machine. Those are moments of celebration, but they are not equity.
What is it then? Like, what does actual systemic equity look like?
True equity is the Tuesday morning coverage. It's the routine, unglamorous, consistent reporting of a domestic netball league in November. It's a journalist expecting a high, ruthless performance from a women's rugby team on a random weekend in March and offering serious tactical critique when they fall short.
It's an editor instinctively deciding to call a female coach for analysis on a men's game.
Yes. It's a reporter turning to a female fan in the stands for her thoughts after a local match, recognizing her as an authentic voice of fandom. Equity is normalization. It is the destruction of the nice surprise narrative. It is treating all athletes as permanent residents in the house of sports, not just seasonal guests.
So let's pull all of this together for you. We have traveled a long way today. We started under the bright lights of NRG Stadium in Houston, dissecting the romance of a tiny Caribbean nation that danced their way onto the world stage, defied a legacy superpower, and commanded the globe's attention for a fleeting magical moment.
And we have traveled from that high-emotion pitch through the quiet systemic data of the 2024 Gender Report.
Looking at the invisible machinery, the conveyor belts, the, quote, math, the expectation gaps that dictates how the media allocates its attention, who gets to hold the microphone, and how our heroes are framed.
The takeaway here is an invitation for you to actively audit the media you consume. Think about your own scrolling habits this morning. When you opened your favorite sports app or checked your news feed, whose faces were in the top 3 thumbnails?
Who wrote the lead article? Who did they quote?
Exactly. The algorithm is feeding you the very bias we have been unpacking. Tomorrow, look past the headline. Is the focus purely on a binary result, or is it on the human ecosystem of the sport? And most importantly, notice the expectations.
Are they expecting them to win or just happy they're playing?
Right. Is the athlete in the story expected to dominate and win, or are they subtly just being patted on the head for showing up? Once you see the expectation gap, you can never unsee it.
And that leaves us with one final provocative thought to mull over. We've seen the data. The 2024 Gender Report proved conclusively that without the immense gravity of a mega event like the World Cup or the Olympics, media visibility absolutely plummets.
It does.
The magnifying glass moves off the underdog, off the women's leagues, and snaps right back to the massive male-dominated rosters that run year-round. So if that is an undeniable mathematical truth of our media ecosystem, well, what happens to Curaçao's football team tomorrow?
It is the ultimate question of visibility, because the mega event is finite.
Exactly. Once this 2026 World Cup ends, once a champion is crowned, and the global television cameras pack up their miles of cables and leave Houston, will Curaçao's visibility simply vanish overnight?
It's highly likely.
Will the world instantly forget the joy of that 21st-minute goal against Germany? Will players like Leandro Bacuna and Levano Mendencia and an old tactician like Dick Advocat be forced to retreat back out of the spotlight? Will they find themselves boarding a tiny, cramped propeller plane of media obscurity, doomed to fly back into the dark, waiting another 4 years just to be seen again?